Welcome to Immigration Invasion, a podcast where we discuss the ridiculous and absurd aspects of immigration law in the U.S. We're your hosts, Asma Din,
Robert Armstrong,
and we are super excited. As you guys can probably see, this podcast looks a little bit different, and that's because we have our first national guest, Gregg. Kevin, thank you so much for agreeing to be on our podcast. We are very excited to have you here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a new format for us. So hopefully, the phenomenal director, Phenomenon Studios has got us all plugged in, and it's in a way that I can't mess it up. But this is our first time recording with somebody not in studio, and who better to have than the veteran immigration podcast veteran, 245 shows in, I believe.
No.
65?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. 200, I guess. Yeah, 249. I think tomorrow will be. No, I'm sorry. No, now I have to do it. 259 tomorrow.
259.
Not including the special episodes, which I don't count the interviews. So it's probably more like 279.
The holiday musical, by the way, was my favorite. Yeah, the Hana Kwanzmas episode was definitely the best. So Kevin Gregg, 12 years of experience as an immigration attorney, both in court, immigration court, real court. Now works with the notorious Ira Kurzban at his firm, the guy from the book, the guy that literally wrote the book on immigration. Can't tell you how happy we are to get this opportunity to talk with you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you guys. I appreciate that kind introduction. Not warranted. I'm happy to be on your show, and it's an honor, and I'm so happy that technology allows us to do this from across the country. I wouldn't know it that this is your first time doing it, not everybody in studio. Those are the only kind of interviews I've done on my show, which, as you know, is not actually an interview show. And it seems like it's going well. Midway through your speaking, Asma, the audio sounded really good. Something was changed on the back end, so you've got some really good people doing something for you guys. And Or you have someone that's not that experienced that realizes that his mic was muted and then unmuted it and it fixed the settings. We may never know. We don't know which one it was. It was one of the two.
We never know.
This is fantastic. It sounds great. I hope it does once we're done.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we'll be able to get a quality episode, and if we don't, you'll just have to come back and we'll have to do another one.
I once actually the interview I did with Trina Real Muto and Ed Ramos a couple of months ago, I realized 15 minutes in that I had not selected my good microphone, so it was using the computer microphone, and I actually went back and re-recorded everything I said to then overlay it. It's a horrible experience. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy, which is neither of you yet. But the other terrible thing, which you guys
he must have heard, Asma.
That's right.
He must have heard.
That's right. Now that you're in this world, you're recording this on Zoom. You're hoping that it actually works, because you don't know that the video saves or the audio saves until about a half hour after, because the quality, it makes it such a large document. So let's hope it saves somewhere. If not, it was nice speaking with you guys, just the three of us.
Yeah. If not, I'll have to recreate it with hand puppets.
That's right.
I mean, it's recreating this episode with a hand puppet will not make it any less legitimate than what's going on in immigration court. Not to jump ahead.
It's a nice segue.
Right.
It's a nice
segue. Not to jump ahead. Before we move on to the first segment, if somebody is ready to jump in the deep end and subscribe, smash the subscribe button on Immigration Review, where can they do it? How often are you dropping, new hotness, man?
Oh, thank you for that. New hotness. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Mm-hmm.
The new hotness drops every Tuesday. It was every Monday for 55 weeks, and I recently had a son, and I recently
Congratulations.
Hey.
Thank you very much. As you know, Asma, most of the work was me on that endeavor. We don't get enough credit, us men, and so I'm going to use your platform to advocate for the men who are historically underrepresented, but especially in the pregnancy realm.
Checking notes. Checking notes.
Why is she gonna watch this?
No, she doesn't. No, she doesn't watch anything I do. I was editing it myself for like 240 weeks, and then I got some editors finally, and I'm so grateful for them. But still, I give it a final review and edit myself, and that still takes a lot of time on Sunday. And I want the full weekend for my son or emergencies. We're all three of us are busy lawyers, so pushed it to Tuesday. Give the final review Monday morning, and I can have the weekend for my son and every other thing I want to do. To answer your question, Robert, though, you can subscribe wherever podcasts are found. Apple and Spotify are the most. I post to Buzzsprout. I suppose you could go to Buzzsprout too. That gives me the statistics, so I know that like 50% are Apple listeners, and it drops every Tuesday unless I do a special episode interview, which then drops whenever I want.
I could tell from all of that summary that you are working way harder at this than I am. So I'm going to have to catch up, because that's editing all by yourself. I told you this when I first met you and we talked about it. I have worked in radio and have a very limited experience editing phone calls to give away Wiener Schnitzels certificates.
Wow.
And the amount of work that goes into doing it, man, hats off to you. So and I'm buttering you up, because if for some reason Phenomenon Studios can't edit this, I will be asking for your pro bono assistance.
That's right. It was a lot of work, but it's done amazing things for me personally and as an attorney. The whole point of it, in addition to trying to bring in clients, get my name out there, was also to double dip. We all know that we should be reading all the cases, and none of us are doing it. And now I am, and I have a reason beyond just general attorney. It's made me a much better attorney. So I've definitely double and triple dipped into it. It has been a lot of work. Thank you for recognizing that, but I can't complain.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude.
Well, let's talk about your podcast.
Yeah, let's talk about my podcast. And,
Yes.
I mean, there's kind of a reason I've been kind of procrastinating getting started, because the first section is broken news, but it's been it hasn't been a slow news month for immigration, right?
Yeah.
We aren't going to go over every single piece of broken news, because I'm not medicated enough for that. But I think there's a couple of things that we wanted to talk about and get somewhat into depth with. I mean, Trump's just outright targeting students. We're no longer at a stage where it's like kind of quasi-legal. I mean, it's just outright, like, they said things we don't like, and therefore it goes against, the U.S. And their enemies. Like, just a superficial explanation of this. What? Like, why? Like, I don't, it just doesn't add up. And for anybody that has been practicing law since before due process was eliminated, it doesn't seem to add up, right? Like, Asma, Kevin, like, what are the justifications that you feel like they're making, if any, for what's going on with the targeting of students?
Well, I will give them some credit to finding these very obscure ways to get these NTAs issued.
I don't know if you ever listened to the Amicus podcast with Delia Lethwick, which is mostly about the Supreme Court on Slate. It's a great podcast. I don't get money from them. But she talks about this too. we as lawyers, we give these post hoc rationalizations by using the law. Your question is fine, Robert. I think it gives them more credit and puts this veneer of legality over it that I don't think they deserve. It gives a lie to the complaining for the last 4 years about First Amendment. First Amendment means whatever they want it to mean, and right now they don't want it to mean as applied to non-citizens, even though every human in America has First Amendment rights. You're exactly right. They're targeting students for speech. Now they're doing it in the F1 status, which is a pretty mushy visa. It's not a green card, for example, and it's not even a very protected non-immigrant visa. But of course, they're doing it with the green card holders as well. The individual who came and tried to naturalize just today, that he was actually detained. We're not even talking about denial of naturalization based on a good moral character finding, which, to be honest with you, I would love to take into federal court and say, you denied a naturalization application just because they said a couple things about the Palestinian cause. Let's go into federal court and try your First Amendment challenge. Instead, they're going to put him in immigration prison in Louisiana and bring him into removal proceedings because Marco Rubio signed a piece of paper. That is a wild world. A wild world premised on a removability provision that nobody has experience with, because there's been like one case and it involved some transnational criminal in the 1990s. So they have found some very interesting loopholes. If this survives a First Amendment as applied challenge, which is where it should go, but there are jurisdiction stripping provisions, so you can't bring a habeas action in federal court, likely, even though Muhammad Khalil has a habeas action pending. It probably goes up to he's in Jersey, right? The Third Circuit on petition for review, but by that time he's probably in Syria. That doesn't moot out the petition for review, but you're going to have an as-applied challenge to this removal provision, because the board has already pretty much said that if you have a Secretary of State letter, and I'm no expert on this issue because no one is, you're good. It's wild. It's something that no president has ever tried, because it is a very uncomfortable statute, and you target the students because it's easy and they have fluffy visas, and authoritarian regimes have never liked student protest. It's what kind of scared Nixon, and it brought down Lyndon Johnson. Not that either of them are authoritarians, but student protest can be a powerful thing in America. I will say one thing, and I hope it doesn't get me in trouble later in my career, but I don't think it should. I'm Jewish. Personally, I believe in the state of Israel and in the idea of Israel, nor do I know anything personally about these individuals. That said, and that doesn't give me any special ability to talk about these things. That said, if you're in the business of deporting people because you don't like what they say, and if you're in the business of calling for people who advocate for the Palestinian nation peacefully, and I don't know what they said, I have a feeling it was not terrorism. If it was terrorism, if it was terrorism, they would have made the allegations in the NTA. They have not made allegations in the NTA. So if they had,
one girl, like I know Ramez Osterk was scooped up on the street by Walmart Ninja looking officials for writing an op-ed. So I don't know how terroristic that can be, or how violent an op-ed can be.
The terrorism provisions are the most expansive provisions in the INA. It is very easy to bring a terrorism allegation. If they haven't even made it, it's very telling. And so if we are in the situation where, advocating for the rights of people and the Palestinian cause is anti-Semitism, that's wild to me. I don't agree with it, so long as you're not advocating for Hamas and the actual murders of people. And I cannot help but say it is a bit rich to have an administration who count as millions of their supporters literal neo-Nazis and white supremacists taking up the mantle of anti-Semitism in a way that historically hasn't had much to do with anti-Semitism. Kind of feels like the Jews are being used. Of course, they're not the real victims in this, where people are being deported for their political views. So, as somebody who supports the state of Israel, I think it is horrific that we are trying to deport people, especially students, and especially green card holders, Kevin, for their views.
It seems like you're not being very respectful. You're being unfair to a false dichotomy.
What's the false dichotomy?
it's Jews versus Palestinians, right? And you're shining a light on the complexity behind this.
I just don't have much time for David Duke taking up the mantle of anti-Semitism. That's all I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah.
it's wild to me. And I don't think it's coming in good faith. And so I will call that out when I see it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you do, because that's one that is an area. Osman and I have talked about this before. When it comes to the situation in the Middle East, when it comes to Israel, Palestine, I proudly can acknowledge I don't know enough to give my opinion. So I shut my mouth, right? I don't know. It's very complex, and so when all of a sudden people that are less informed than me start using the situation there to justify awful things that they wanted to do anyways, I don't buy it.
I could be wrong. I'd have to look at the INA, but we've all filled out an I-45 adjustment of status application. If the INA really cared about anti-Semitism, and again, no fan of anti-Semitism. I don't think it's what these...
It's not your bag.
Not a fan. I don't think it's what these guys are doing. I haven't heard everything they said, but whatever. If we
give it like a 1-star, 2-star review, maybe, at the most.
Right. If we really cared about anti-Semitism, if that was what we wanted to make someone removable for, and we wanted to really bring that challenge right up to the First Amendment and say, is INA going to win? Or is the first, because anti-Semitism might be horrific and horrible. Still, sometimes the First Amendment protected thing. Anyway, if we wanted to do that, I'm not sure that the I-45 would ask, were you a Nazi between 1939 and 1945, right? I'm pretty sure that the INA only makes you inadmissible if you were a Nazi for that very small amount. You're a Nazi for the rest of the time. So long as you didn't engage in killing, you're actually okay. I don't think you're inadmissible. I don't think that anti-Semitism is a giant concern of the INA historically. And that's giving them the benefit of the doubt right now in how they're using anti-Semitism, which I have no desire to do.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You know what? I was a lot deeper than I was even hoping we could get.
That's how it's gonna get. That's how it's gonna get.
Yeah, warning. Yeah, no, but I think it needs to be said, right? It needs the complexity of anti-Semitism and people standing up for the rights of Palestinians needs to be looked at in a more holistic and intelligent way. We're looking at anywhere between, depending on what news outlet that you look at, anywhere between 500 and 600 students visas denied. Some of them for maybe some criminal question mark, maybe something, but a lot of them also because of speech that has been deemed anti-Semitic because it was pro.
Let's take anti-Semitism out of it. Anti-Semitism is not a ground of inadmissibility or removability. You start deporting people for the things that they say that isn't directly, advocating for harm, that isn't a crime in and of itself. Let's take anti-Semitism out of it. There is no limit. There is no limit to that, and I like to think a Democrat administration isn't going to come in, that there actually aren't two sides on this, because this just isn't happening with a Democrat president probably in my lifetime. But you start criminalizing speech, you start deporting speech, there is no limit. Today's anti-Semitism could be tomorrow's anything. There is no limit.
Right. So. Asma and Kev, one of the mechanisms that they seem to be using to facilitate this donkey show, no offense to donkeys, is the old jurisdiction switcheroo, right? And there's been several stories, several cases where it looks like someone is detained somewhere else and then immediately brought to the Fifth Circuit. So what's y'all's take on why they're doing that?
It's because they know Fifth Circuit Louisiana judges don't care about due process.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't. I haven't had great luck with the Louisiana detained judges or the Fifth Circuit detained judges. Absolutely, but I do. I think it comes mostly to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit's shown that it's willing to do a lot of wild stuff. They got reversed like 5 times last term because they're willing to go as far as possible. I mean, I think they would have given that firearm back to that domestic abuser, for example, because of history and tradition. So, and thank God for habeas. Thank God for good lawyering. Thank God for nonprofit big firms, which we'll probably get to in a bit. But I think it was like a 3 a.m. habeas kept Muhammad Khalil in the Third Circuit. Although his detention, I guess he ended up in the Fifth Circuit anyway, but I'm not, his detention might have stayed in Jersey, but you're right, it was a Louisiana judge. So they're forum shopping. As someone involved in nationwide litigations, both sides forum shop, and I suppose this is just another version of ICE forum shopping. Like, I like to think we're not currently forum shopping in one of the cases I'm involved in, but there's a district, Judge Kaczmarek in the Panhandle of Texas for a while was the only judge in that portion of the Northern District of Texas, if I'm not mistaken, and like something like 10 or 20 corporations incorporated in a strip mall so they could get in front of Judge Kaczmarek. So it's forum.
Coincidence.
It's forum shopping. We'll call it forum.
Yeah.
ICE forum shops. There's a lot of land in the Fifth Circuit, and they've got the judges that they like with case law in the Fifth.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next part of the breaking news that we wanted to touch on. I mean, this one affects all three of us directly, right? A little more directly than we're used to. So there was an EO executive order released by the White House in March that was very gloriously entitled "Preventing Abuses of the Legal System in the Federal Court," and it highlighted what the administration felt was the shenanigans that people and attorneys are doing, and then it gave us a very special, as immigration attorneys, a very special shout out, right? Like, they highlighted us very specifically and accused immigration attorneys writ large at coaching people that are applying for asylum, and so that seemed to be, that was like the first salvo, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, what's the real reason? What do you think the real reason, in your humble opinion, that you go after attorneys? Why is Trump targeting attorneys?
Would you like to take that as one, or was that for me?
I think that's for you, Kevin.
Why? Well, it's not new. Jeff Sessions did it, the dirty immigration lawyer. There were fraud investigations, and some of that's warranted. There's fraud in immigration. There's fraud in a lot of areas of law. There are low-level immigration attorneys and other types of attorneys. I don't think immigration is special. You do it publicly to try to put fear into the immigration attorney community and to the non-citizen community, and to prevent things from being filed in the first place. The Trump administration, of course, has gone a lot further by actually threatening these big law firms with money, and
but don't worry, Kevin. These law firms, they're tough. They're made up of some of the most
hats off,
hardcore.
Hats off to WilmerHale, Jenner and Block, and Perkins Coie. I mean, hats off to them. I'm going to give them. They all gross $1 billion. So don't get me wrong, but like Perkins Coie, is my understanding, their biggest client is Lockheed Martin. You started saying that if you contract with Perkins Coie, then you can't contract with the U.S. government, and you're Lockheed Martin. That's a big deal for leadership in the law firm. So hats off to them for fighting back. I think you should. I don't know why you become a lawyer if you're not willing to fight back against injustice. Don't get me wrong, but I give them their flowers, absolutely. Yeah. And let's not forget the individual who's defending WilmerHale is the legal the conservative legal superstars. Paul Hughes. the name escapes me. I don't want
Sounds.
to.
Yeah.
I don't want to. That's a smaller firm. I don't think that they can do this targeting of immigration firms because it's not like we're contracting with the U.S. government or having security clearances. But he's also extorting some of these firms, right? $100 million of pro bono services to defend Trump pet projects. That's extortion. In any reasonable time, that would be grounds for impeachment right then and there. But we are in the craziest of times ever, and I hope history will remember it.
Yeah. No, we're not in the best timeline. I don't know if you saw. I feel like I saw like a big flash right before all this weirdness started. Right, so that must be where we crossed over to this weird timeline where all of a sudden, the administration of the most powerful economy, most powerful country ostensibly in the world is shaking down law firms for free time. It's basically the equivalent of shaking down your friend for a discount on a pair of sneakers at the finish line, Like, it's bizarre. It's bizarre.
We're early on in it. I tried to keep telling myself that, but every time I do, it gets worse. And it's a scary time. At least, for a while in my life, it was a bit boring. You read about the 60s, the 70s, other revolutionary times. I would, at least. I'd be like, well, that would have been interesting to be in such a time. And here we are. I was hoping the revolution wasn't going to be controlled by the Federalist Society and people who want to tear down democracy. I thought that the moral arc of history, bent towards progressive things, and maybe it still does. But it's hard. It's a hard time. It's a hard timeline to be in.
And it may still bend that way, but right now we're in a not good bend.
Not good bend.
We're in a not good, and that's anybody familiar with quantum physics is familiar with that term. Not good bend. That's it's pretty wild.
Before we leave the current immigration news segment of your show, not to steal it, I have done talks recently. I can't not talk about Kilmer Abrego Garcia. It is the most horrific, upsetting thing that I've experienced in the legal profession, and it's only been 12 years or 13 years, don't get me wrong. And he's not dead yet, but to take someone who has withholding of removal, this is about the rule of law. We win withholding of removal grants, and it is difficult. It is hard, and you put on a giant case, and it is protection. And of course, there's always been third country removal possibility, and there's been the possibility of taking withholding away, but DHS has to go into court and prove their case. If we don't care about the rule of law, and you can just snatch someone up, put them in a third country, and then say, federal court, you have no authority. We are in wild times. It's being credibly reported that Donald Trump was already talking with Bukele today at the White House about doing it with U.S. citizens. It's clearly what's happening. They're trying to pick a fight with the judiciary to expand authoritarian measures to get rid of due process. This man is a pawn by putting labeling MS-13 as a terrorist group aside, which I just think is wild as well. They're horrific. Not pro MS-13, but if they're a terrorist group, but whatever. Let's put that aside. To make a mistake and then have the audacity to say, not only are we not going to fix it, but you federal judge can't make us, is mind-blowing. And I can't stop being upset. And meanwhile, this poor man who had more than a 51% chance of being killed by the gangs in El Salvador is in the worst gang-infested prison in El Salvador, and the administration doesn't care, or they're like a 6-year-old who now it's gone too far and they don't want to give in because then no one's going to tell them. This man's life is on the line, the U.S. citizen wife and child. It's cruelty for the sake of cruelty, and even worse, cruelty for the sake of wrecking how justice works in America.
Yeah, and there's no grown-ups in the room.
No, there are no. You know what? People keep saying that they are grown up. They know what they're doing. They're trying to do this. This is what they want. We haven't given them enough credit for 10 years. I'm done not giving them enough credit. Stephen Miller knows exactly what he's doing. They know what they're doing. They want this, and it's unconscionable. It is unconscionable, and if the rule of law falls with this man, it is one step to so many other areas of the rule of law. If you can get snatched off the street, and sent to El Salvador, and you're there before you can bring a habeas action, which is what the Supreme Court just in their decision.
Yeah.
If that can happen to anyone, and that's not the logic that should give this man rights and self and worth, that it can happen to a U.S. citizen, but it is the reality. They're saying no jurisdiction, federal court. That applies to everyone.
Yeah. The ICE should not be operating like a fascist regimes or authoritarian regimes secret police, right? And that's what it's increasingly feeling like. And because of the broad authority that they have 100 miles within the border, which is just about every major city in the U.S., and just the way that the INA is written, the apocalypse of things that can come of this if it's not stopped, if there isn't some mechanism to stop it, is pretty long.
I'll give them even more credit. I'm not going to call them fascists and that they're... I don't like what they're doing, but mistakes happen. Bring the guy home. It's not... There is nothing wrong with admitting, especially if you're a DOJ attorney, and that guy with oil who they've put on leave just for doing what attorneys are supposed to do. Reporting is that he's no progressive. He's not some immigrant rights defender. He's just an attorney, probably leans a bit conservative, doing what we're taught as attorneys. Your client makes a mistake, you clean it up. There's nothing wrong with that. That they are picking this fight and choosing to be cruel is something that'll stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just how spineless the Supreme Court decision was, with no guidance on his return.
I joked on LinkedIn today. I use the word facilitate when I'm trying to be ambiguous and trying to not have to say anything in an email, but say everything. Justice Roberts is a very good writer. He knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
It's
very
stuff.
disappointing.
It's bad stuff.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm actually going to pause. I need to get some water, so I'm going to pause here just a second.
Sure. You can keep recording.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So, want to jump into this next section here, and Osmo, we've been pondering this the last couple of weeks quite a bit, right? So we want to take this section
Yeah. So the immigrant registration is allowed to move forward. So what are we telling people? What advice are we giving to our clients?
Yeah, if that's a question for me, that's not very fair. We've been talking about this at the firm a lot. If we are asked direct questions, that is one thing. I'm not sure I'm proactively going out and telling them, because I don't even know. Yes, it can go forward, but who is covered, who is not covered based on what has happened in the past, if they came in on a visa or if they ever got their fingerprints taken, I don't actually know, nor do I know whether there will be other federal court challenges, not to mention, again, an as-applied challenge based on the Fifth Amendment, right? You are, by admitting that you're in this country unlawfully, you are potentially running up against a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, even though it's just a misdemeanor, even though they're trying to call them criminals, make them horrifically criminal when being present unlawfully in America. Don't recommend it, but it's just a minor misdemeanor. It is still criminal activity. And so there are just too many questions out there for me to feel comfortable providing conclusive legal advice.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's kind of where we're at as well. I'm not giving specific advice on this. This has been it's something that's been half-baked, rolled out from the beginning. The four corner boundaries of who's supposed to be covered and then what happens, and even how they're supposed to register doesn't make any sense, right? So, I mean, aside from that, by and large, it looks like most of the people that we'd be interacting with as immigration attorneys, anyways, are already considered registered, right? In some form of fashion, or will be registering when they apply for some form of relief.
Right.
So, what purpose does this serve other than just to scare the crap out of people? I
am worried. I am worried that maybe one day we'll be applying for an LP, adjustment of status or even naturalization, and the adjudicator will hold against them 2 or 3 years when they were not registered. That does worry me, but that is a fear for a much later day.
Also, I think a concern is people who are traveling for their immigrant visa interview after they've been approved for an I-601A waiver. I think that is there's a concern in the more immediate sense of people who don't register, of what will happen when they go to their interview abroad. What if they get stuck?
That is true, and I'll jump in a bit. Whatever you're doing with the audio sounds a lot better now. It was it was bad beforehand with like a almost helicopter sound in the background, but now it's really good. So I'm not sure what you're doing there. So to start over, that is true. And we see it with the Munoz decision from the Supreme Court last year, where I can't remember what his name was. Luis. Miss Munoz is the U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. He goes to El Salvador with the 601A in hand and isn't let back in. It's such a scary position to be in as an immigration attorney. But I do think, and I haven't looked into it, I think that by applying and getting a 601A, you're probably registered. But what will the consulate officer do about your time not registered?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an open question that I don't think they've answered. I don't think that they've provided a roadmap. And so along with many other things that people ask, hey, what do I do based on this thing that came out? The answer is, I don't know. We just need to wait for now, right? All right, Kev. Is Kev okay?
Sure.
AKA KG.
There's a lot of KGs in front of me, but I'm happy to join the ranks.
There are. All right. So I kind of wanted to wrap this up with a I don't know, man, like a kind of meta question. Like, what the fuck is an immigration law right now? You know, like, what is an immigration law? Because it's another inquiry, another question that I get from my clients a lot. You know, someone calls up and they say, oh no, Trump just put out a new law, and the law says blah, 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 blah. But, you know, first of all, where is the real immigration law found? Where is the cornerstone immigration law found for us? This is a simple kind of 101 question.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're lawyers. I'll die on this hill. If not, there's no point to being lawyers. I mean, immigration law is found in the INA. It's 8 USC and to a lesser extent 8 CFR, but if the regulations in 8 CFR go beyond the statute at 8 USC, then you have a ultra virus claim in federal court. Executive orders are not law. Pronouncements that DHS makes aren't law, but we poo-poo them, and more importantly, our clients disregard them at their own risks. It's one thing to say the law is this, and so, you know, that's what the law is, and you're saying it to a client who's now in El Salvador because the Trump administration decided to disregard a grant of withholding of removal. I think we as immigration attorneys need to be prepared to go into federal court, or to hand it off to someone and refer it out to someone who is on an emergency basis, because unfortunately this administration seems not to want to comply with the law unless they're forced to do it. And that's not how the law is supposed to work. We're supposed to be attorneys all operating in good faith. There are disagreements about what the law means, and we can hash that out in federal court. But not everything is supposed to be a fight, and you're not supposed to be necessarily having these frivolous fights sometimes with a person in immigration prison. Unfortunately, I think we are getting to the point where the administration isn't going to follow laws it doesn't like, or is going to try not to follow laws it doesn't like unless a federal judge makes them. And that's unfortunate, but the law is still the law. The law is found in the INA.
Yeah. You were going to say something else, Mom?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Sorry. I misread that. All right. So if we say the INA is the primary source of law, where would we find like secondary sources of law in immigration?
Well, I don't want to call the regulations secondary. They are still law, and the only way to not follow a regulation is to get a federal judge to say that regulation is beyond the statute. So shouldn't be in the business of not following the regulations, 8 CFR. The FAM as well. I'm not sure if the FAM has the force of law, but it's certainly all but binding on the Department of State. And so if you're outside of this country dealing with the Department of State, the FAM is essentially the law, even more so because you can't really sue the Department of State consulate. So the FAM is almost law. Secondary sources, historically, the Kurzman's Law Sourcebook, hopefully my podcast, all of the other great books that Ayla does. Those are people's, even Ira's book, which is fantastic, obviously. It's been around for 40 years. It's
the book.
It's the book, but even that is his opinion, even though it's right, but a parenthetical of a case is by definition an opinion. The precedential cases are also law in the circuits where your case is beginning. So if you're in San Diego, it's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals whose law binds. That is law. Right. That's as good as statute.
Okay, so then what about executive orders and grand pronouncements?
Yeah, the guy's got he's got a gold visa with his face on it. It's literally not EB-5 law. He's just making stuff up. He's the great master manipulator. He's the showman. He's the Ringling Brothers leader, but we've put him in the White House.
He's the Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon. Maybe
he's jacked.
Maybe right.
First
that's
of all,
true. Maybe it's my millennial talking when I was like growing up on WWF before it became WWE. But like Vince McMahon.
Oh my God, Kevin! I was a huge WWF fan.
I was Mankind. Mankind was my guy. I don't know about you, but I love Mankind.
Mine was Yokozuna.
Oh yeah, that guy was something.
That guy was awesome.
So I've got more respect for Vince McMahon, even though I know believe me, he's got his things. But executive orders, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, but executive orders I do think are meaningless until they are put into effect by the agency through regulation or action. It's there's the U.S. government. A lot of it is acting on norms and unwritten or barely written rules, and you've never really had a president who wanted to blow it up because it was working really well for America. We're the envy. We bring these asylum cases. We see what happens when the government stops working and starts becoming just who's in power, who are your political allies, and the like. And that is now what they seem to be doing. So an executive order, in my opinion, I believe means nothing until DOJ writes a regulation, until that consulate officer, pursuant to an update in the FAM or some internal memorandum, denies that passport application by an individual born in America to undocumented parents. Until that actually happens, an executive order is pretty much fluff. But the second it happens, all my ivory tower speech notwithstanding, you have a real practical problem. And you got to go to federal court and fight it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can ICE just deport citizens? And I know you've touched on this. And I, we've been grazing this issue through the podcast. And even the way it's the question I formatted the question, can they, is a little loaded. Kevin, can ICE deport U.S. citizens?
I don't think this is well beyond immigration law, and quite frankly might not even be something that anybody knows about. And I do apologize for the glare coming at me. It's that time of the day in San Diego with the sun. But we still have a sun, and so we've got that going for us. Anyway.
Unless it gets deported.
I don't think that's the right question. I think it's a straight up no. ICE cannot. First of all, ICE doesn't have jurisdiction over U.S. citizens, maybe unless they're coming in the border, and even then. But I don't think anyone can deport a U.S. citizen with the idea that they have to apply to come back, right? You have a right to come in as a U.S. citizen, always. Can ICE send people who have been convicted of crimes to other countries to serve their prison sentence? I have no idea. And we're about to find out. I'm sure there are other reasons. The first thing that comes to mind is the Eighth Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. I don't know, but even that wouldn't be a deportation. I don't think there's any, unless Congress wrote a law, and even then I don't know. I don't think there'd be any argument under present law that the individual who served his prison sentence in a Salvadoran prison couldn't come back to America after he served his prison if he survived. But whether or not they can actually do it, I don't know. But I don't think it's proper to call it a deportation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Final question, and it's a doozy. Kevin, it's a doozy. What if the executive doesn't follow the law? In other words,
I know what I mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, this is for our readers. I know. I mean, our listeners that may not know, because I know you know, and you're about to drop the hammer, right? But what if the Supreme Court, says to do something in a less flimsy, wishy-washy language, and the executive goes, "No, not gonna do it."
Yeah.
Then what?
People don't give Donald Trump enough credit. The man had Andrew Jackson as the portrait behind, I think his desk during the first term. It was an intentional thing. Andrew Jackson, the slave owner, the atrocity against the Native Americans, all the things. He isn't your usual choice. It was an intentional choice, and we all learned this in grade school, and it kind of gets told as, Andrew Jackson's kind of a badass because, Justice Marshall has made his decision about the Cherokees. Now let's see him enforce it. Why are we even learning that story? Quite frankly, in retrospect, it does seem just like a way to glorify the strongman president, and it hasn't really ever, in my knowledge, I'm sure it hasn't really been tested after that. But here's Donald Trump choosing Andrew Jackson, and he knew it, right? I mean, that's what he's doing. The Chief Justice, I don't understand, Roberts. The Chief Justice wrote the presidential immunity decision last term. We talk about Chief Justice Roberts as if he is this big institutionalist who cares more about the legitimacy of the Supreme Court more than anything and executive overreach, but then he comes out with the immunity decision, almost giving the soon-to-be Donald Trump a blank check. If I'm giving him some benefit of the doubt, which I've been doing a lot on your podcast this evening, I would say he used the word facilitate in his Abrego decision because he was worried about what happens if he said effectuate or something stronger, and the Trump administration said not going to do it and created the constitutional crisis. But if that's the case, the man has no business being on the Supreme Court because you're the Supreme Court justice. That fight's coming. That's Donald Trump's choice to violate the Supreme Court and 200 years of precedent by not following their legal interpretation. The fact that you don't want to have that fight because it's a non-citizen in a Salvadoran prison is unfortunate. If he used the word facilitate to avoid your questions, that's a long way of not answering your question. To answer it directly, I have no idea. It seems that he's put maybe scary people in the U.S. military. I don't know much about the military. It seems that they're not the usual people in the military. I even have heard Cory Booker speak, a U.S. senator in the minority, but Cory Booker's already talking about how, historically to save America, it's taken the people. Sometimes I want to scream at him and say, "You're a U.S. senator. It's not. Some of it's got to be up to the Democrats in Congress."
Right.
But we did vote for Donald Trump, and he hasn't been quiet about his intents. What happens if he violates the Supreme Court, or if he violates this lower district court judge's order with Mr. Abrego Garcia? It goes up to the Fourth Circuit, and then it goes to the Supreme Court again. We see if they do something else. But if he really violates the Supreme Court, I think the presidential immunity decision is quite clear that he can do almost anything he wants. That's not the case for those following his orders, but he also has broad pardon power. So it is a bit scary, and it's not a bluff I want to call, and I hope with everything I have that they don't do it. But here we are 4 months in having this conversation.
Yeah.
But 3 months in, I'm sorry.
Yeah. We have not hit the 100-day mark yet. Believe it or not. Wow. Well,
on that cheery note,
you guys asked me these questions. We could have talked about lots of things that would have been more cheerful.
Kevin, I mean, look, being an immigration attorney right now is not about. There's not a lot of giggles, right? There's just not a lot of giggles to be had. I disagree, but they can't all be talked on a podcast. Some of these stories of our clients and the ones that I talk about on my show from these cases are legitimately funny. Some of these people's lives, not laughing at them, but just laughing at the absurdity of life and the things we see every day, taking the joy and the wonderful families that come into our lives through these cases, celebrating the wins. We are not the head of the Senate minority party. I don't know who is, because Chuck Schumer certainly isn't. But we are not that. What we can do is promote justice every day with our clients, and we can try to advocate them to the maximum extent possible. And you know what? Wins during this administration are going to taste just a little bit sweeter than they did during the prior one. Maybe that's the positive spin on it. We can do good and do important things on an individual basis, and if we're fortunate enough to be part of something that affects more people or to even effectuate political change, all the better. Yeah, that's how you end the podcast episode.
Absolutely. That's how you end a podcast.
Almost 5 years of experience here. 5 years of experience.
250 plus shows, y'all. Yeah, man.
Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you on our podcast. We were really fangirling about this. I'm not going to lie. We were super excited about this.
Yeah.
That's very kind of
you. You're the Kurzban of immigration podcasts.
What? That's very kind. That's too kind. And I can't also, by the way, give my shout outs to John Khosravi, who's been doing it even longer than me, although our shows are very different. But I have certainly put a lot of effort into this, and I truly am honored that people are paying attention and getting value from it. And I'm glad we know each other now, Robert. I'm glad we met at the Austin conference 2 years ago. I'm not at that conference without the podcast, so the whole thing has been a blessing.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
We definitely appreciate it, and hope to have the kind of longevity where we get to the 250 pluses, and people like yourself have definitely paved the way. Hopefully, we figure out how to give it our own little spin, our own little flavor. But even in these times, even in these crazy times, we're going to try to focus on the micro instead of the macro, right? Yeah. Like how do we make things better, in the space that where we have some influence. We're, as things start to normalize a little bit, look forward to being able to have smaller issue podcast episodes, and where there's a little bit more room to just have fun, but I think it is really, it does serve an important purpose to have people on here that can help us unwind the big knotted up ball of immigration data. I won't even call it news. It's just data, right?
Yeah.
Pull it apart and make sense of it. And you knocked it out the park today, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, as always, appreciate anybody that's tuned in to listen to us. You can find our podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, if that's your thing, YouTube. Please go out, listen to it, and give us feedback. Let us know what you think, what you like, what you don't like. But we appreciate everybody's support. Our guests, of course, and Phenomenon Studio for helping us with editing and getting this all put together in a professional.
Yes, and please follow Immigration Review Podcast if you don't already do so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Robert and Asma. Are we done recording? I can get that $25,000 check for my appearance on your show wherever I gave you my. You can work with my people. We're done recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're working on that
We're
giant
working.
clearinghouse
I want
check.
the giant check. Just hope we're not recording.
No worries. Look, that check is backed by the trust that we have in the current administration.
All right.
So that's how much you can bet that check is coming.
Can't wait.
Spending it already.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
I guess.